Welcome to video 2, where we're going to talk about how we can combine these two data sets. So remember, we ended last time with two different data sets that show up, we could see that are in our pivot table, but we get these weird errors like relationships between tables may be needed. And then when we actually try to bring in these fields to see the actuals, and you can see I renamed these, but we want to see actuals against forecast, and how do we, like, what are all these, why are they all the same? And then we were in a big mess. So this time we're going to figure out and show how we can combine these two. So I'm going to introduce a topic to you that is very key and it's called dimension tables. So you can see that I've named these data tables, or these data sets, with the prefix fact. And I'm doing that to differentiate from what we're going to learn about, called dimension tables. So again, this is from my learning and understanding of data architecture, and how I've learned is to over the years is to label these fact whatever for data sets. The data where the actual tables, this is what we're looking at here, are called tables. When we get the tables that are going to house the actual values that we're going to see, those are called fact tables. But I'm going to introduce the dimension table to us. So dimension tables are tables that allow us to connect different fact tables. So you can see here that if we go back here, we want to see our revenue versus our actuals by geo. Let's start with geo. But we tried to do that because we could see that there was geo or region. I'm using those interchangeably. We could see region in each of these data sets, but this is obviously not right. So I want to show us how we can do that. So let's start with a region table. So the key concept that I want us to know about is that we need dimension tables for every slice of the data that we want to see. So we want to see both of these, actuals and forecast, by region. So we need a region dimension table. Now there are a few ways you can do that. I've already opened up, or I've created another file that's going to house our dimension tables. Now you can either do this in the exact same way, where you go to your other sources and you go to Excel, okay? Or you can actually house your dimension tables, or the source of your dimension table can be within the spreadsheet you're using in itself. So if we go back to our data model, I've saved this called data model. Let's just make a tab called, let's call it the dimension tab. So I've copied this. I've already created all of these, and we'll unhide this as we go along. But let's just say we want to make a region tab, and so or dimension table, to combine these two data sets by region, because we want to see it by region. So first things first, I like to name these tables as well. I like to name them dim and then whatever. In this case, it's region. All right. So let's name this dim region. You can name this, and I make these all tables, by the way. I'm not just writing region and then writing Americas. I do that, but then I make this a table. And again, it's not a tutorial on how to make a table, but make it a table. And then the easiest way to do this, again, is you go to PowerPivot tab, and you see this button here that says Add to Data Model. And when you make this a table, it will, if you're selecting anywhere in the table and you Add to Data Model, it will show up in your data model. So again, you could also do this the same way that we did the other ones, where you go to other sources and open it up from an Excel. Because these are small dimension tables that we're using, we're gonna eventually have them all sourced from our model itself in this Excel file. Again, if you have SQL, you can do all sorts of things to bring in different dimension tables, but we're not going there. So this is our region dimension table. So so the first step you want to do is to link each of these tables to your dimension table, because again, you want to see both of these data sets by region. So you're in this diagram view, almost called it diaphragm view, but diagram view. You find each of your data sets, your fact tables, and you link. It's very simple to just drag and drop. So you drag from your fact table, you find the region. This is for the actuals. Find a region and drag it and link it to your dimension table. Okay, and do the same thing with your other one. I've built models where there are 10 or so fact tables. So I'd be dragging and dropping 10. Again, amateur here, there might be a faster way to do that. But I actually like to do it one by one because I like to see what's going on. So we've linked these. We've linked each of these to region. So let's go back to our data model. Let's go back to our pivot table. So it still kind of looks funny. I wonder what's going on. So even if we refresh it, it's probably still going to see, okay, there's just something going on here. Well, I think the first thing we always want to do with these data sets, if you have a time element, is you've got to make a date or a time dimension table. So in PowerPivot in Excel, this is where it varies slightly from PowerBI, but in PowerPivot in Excel, it is very easy to make a date table. So you go to design up at the top, and there's a date table right here. So just do new. Okay, and that's going to create a date dimension table, which really is just a table full of dates. So if we go from the diagram view into the grid view, where we actually can see your data sets. So let's click there. So again, we see our fact actuals, we see our fact forecast, we see our dim region that's now in here. We look at, it's called calendar. I'm actually going to rename that again because I like to be organized and call it everything dim something. We call it dim calendar, you can rename it to dim date, whatever. But the nice thing about PowerPivot is it creates a date dimension table for us. So you can see it has date, year, month, number, a lot of other things, okay? So let's go back and let's just see if the date was giving us trouble. Because remember, in one, we were trying to look at the totals for each. So let's just take a look here. So we drag, again, we find the fact actuals, we find the date that's coming from each data set. In this case, it's called date. We drag and we link it to the dimension table for the calendar. Do the same thing with the other one. So let's take a look now and see what our data set's telling us. So it's still not right. Just remembered. So we are still pulling region from each of the individual data sets. So this is key number 2. The first important topic was you've got to create a dimension table for every dimension, geo, or region, product, customer, and we're going to get there, date, for every level of detail you want to see. So the second key is when you create those dimension tables, you no longer pull that dimension, in this case region, from each of the fact tables. So let's just remove it. Once you create that dimension table, then you find your dimension table, in this case region, in your total list of stuff that's over here in the pivot table. So you can see we're calling it region map, and we're going to understand that better in a minute. But bring that over, and all of a sudden things look better. Okay, so this looks good. But we can kind of see here that we have an AMS, but we only have a value for actuals, but not for forecast. Well, that kind of makes sense because we didn't forecast for the AMS. We forecasted everything for Americas. Same with APAC. And again, actuals can come in different formats. And that's the life of a data scientist. I don't claim to be a data scientist, but any time you want to wrangle data, having things named slightly different is the bane of our existence. But at least we've got something here. We've got it consolidated, right? And so let's say we want to look at what's going on in 2020. Obviously, our actuals or our forecast is only for 2020, but let's just bring in our date. So we bring in our date. Okay, let's bring in our columns here. Let's group those. I like doing that. So we should be able to see, especially if we go like this, that our forecast, we have nothing. Let's collapse all here. We have nothing for 18 and 19 for forecast because we were just starting in 2020. So that makes sense. So let's just get rid of these and let's just start looking at 2020. So, okay. So great. So again, key number one, you have to create as many dimension tables as you want to see the cuts of your data. Important topic number two. When you create those dimension tables, you must pull, when you want to see the data by that particular dimension, you have to pull the field from the table that you created, the dimension table you created. Okay. So again, we have all these fields. I'd like to only see everything because really AMS is Americas. A/PAC is really APAC. I want to see these combined. So what we can do is we have our dimensions here. And I mentioned that in my other, I have a dimension full list here. I'm just going to copy and paste for the sake of speed. We know that all of these are really like this. So actually, okay, so dim region. All right. So what I just did was I went in and individually mapped and made a mapping of the Americas. Obviously, we're still going to call it Americas. EMEA, we're going to call it EMEA. APAC, right? But AMS, I want that to start pulling as Americas. Anytime I see AMS, I want to pull it as Americas. Same with APAC, A/PAC, I want it to be APAC. Europe, I want it to be EMEA. This will make our lives easier in looking at the data. So once I've done that, I go back to my data model and I can click on the region and I can refresh it. Okay, and all of a sudden it adds in that extra column. Okay, so now I have region in there. I called the other one region map because, again, looking ahead a little bit, I'm calling it region map because that's the map. I'm mapping all of these individual ones, these separate ones, the incorrect ones, I would say, to a broader one so that they're the same between both data sets. So now when I look at our model here, I'm going to rename this tab model. So I refresh this, okay? I still see these individual pieces, but now when we open up when we see our dimension table here, we have what we've mapped. So I'm actually just going to take out the region map column and bring in region. And there we go. We see each region revenue versus actuals. Okay? So again, we have to create as many dimensions as we want to see our data, dimension tables as we want to see our data. And once we create those dimension tables, we need to pull the dimensions from those tables and not from the individual fact tables or data sets.